So God led the people away from the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up into orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. So he says here, lest they change their minds and they see war. Now, these people have been living in Goshen ever since Joseph brought him in. They're farmers. They don't train for war, they haven't had to. And so they're going to go out into the wilderness where there's going to be conflicts. But God is going to go with them. And so it says they didn't want to take him to the way of the Philistines. We can see here where the Philistines is on the left-hand side. That's the way of the Philistines, and that happens to be Gaza, right? Pretty prominent in the news. And then you see on the right-hand side, you see the red line, and that would have been the short way. Right from Goshen, take a left at the sea, and you're there. But he took them a longer way to get out of Egypt. Now, if you got to think about it for a minute, so God has this planned out. He's going to lead them out, not the short way, but they're going to have to work for it. And they're going to have to go down into the Sinai Peninsula and then cross the Red Sea. And so the purpose was also because he wanted to finish off Pharaoh. He wanted them to be no longer in their lives. So Exodus 13:19, and then it says, and Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under a solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So Joseph made him swear an oath, and Joseph says, no bones about it, I'm not staying here. And then in Hebrews 11:22, it says, this is what they attached the faith of Joseph to. It says, and when his end was near, he spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. So faith was contributed to Joseph because he says, surely God will visit you. This is a faith that he believes that God will keep his promise. Romans 4, we see that faith is believing God will keep his promise. Now, there's two types of faith in the Bible. This one is pistis in the Greek, to be faithful that he's going to keep his promise. And then there's pisteo, which means faithfulness, and we'll get to that one too. So there's two types of faith, even though they're called faith in the Bible, and sometimes we miss that faithfulness part. And it's so critical to understanding the whole picture. So Genesis 15:13, it says, then the Lord said to Abram, no. So this is how Joseph knew that that they were going to leave. This is where he gets his faith from, and that he wanted them to take him out. He wanted to go back home. He wanted his bones and so the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. So the Lord is telling Abram, 400 years, it's going to take a while to develop this plan. What is that? Okay. Okay, so God tells Abraham, I'm going to send your people to Egypt. They're going to be there for 400 years, right? And so when Moses comes and he hears the groaning of the people, then God says, then I remembered that my covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now that word remember is a verb, and it means that God's taking action, right? So the 400 years is about to be up. God says, yep, it's time to get them out. I'm going to remember my covenant, and I'm going to take them out. Then in verse 21, it says of Genesis 48, he says, then Israel said to Joseph, this is Joseph's dad, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. So Israel is telling Joseph that they will go back to the land of their fathers. So Joseph has got this in his head. And then in Genesis 50:24, and Joseph said to his brothers, now Joseph is repeating what his dad said. And he says, I'm about to die, but God will visit you and bring you out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him and put him in a coffin in Egypt. So this is not just the bones they're going to take. They're going to take the coffin with the body of Joseph on there. And this is not just anybody. This is Joseph that represents Messiah ben Joseph, right? This is a foreshadow of a Messiah returning back to the land. Joshua 24:32, and he says, as for the bones of Joseph, which the people of Israel brought up from Egypt, they buried them at Shechem. Shechem is the point of covenant. Lots of things happen at Shechem. And so Joseph is being brought back to Shechem, back to the place of covenant, back to where it all starts. And he says, in the piece of the land that Jacob brought from his sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money, and became an inheritance of the descendants of Joseph. So he buys this piece of property in advance for the inheritance of the descendants of Joseph. So the descendants of Joseph was Manasseh and Ephraim, which grow into the 10 tribes, basically, right? So this is an inheritance for the biggest part of Israel. So Joseph has in mind that Dad says that, yeah, you're going back, and I bought you a place. It's your inheritance. So Joseph says, I want to go back to my inheritance. So, but when does he get his inheritance, right? Not when he's in a coffin and they're burying him in the ground. He gets his inheritance at resurrection. So Joseph probably understands that, just like Abraham, when God says, I'm going to give you all this land, and then Abraham knows, hey, I'm about to die, and I didn't receive the promise, but I know I will. I know that means God has to resurrect me to put me back into the land, to complete his promise to Abraham. It's required by God that he's going to have to resurrect these. Resurrection has to happen. Exodus 13:20. So they took journey from Sukkot and camped at Etham and at the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of the cloud to lead the way. So who's the cloud? Who's the pillar of the cloud? It says, and the Lord went with them before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way. So the Lord is in this cloud. and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and to night. And he did not take away the pillar of the cloud by day, or the pillar by fire by night from before the people. So, and it'll go on here say, so now it says the Lord is in the cloud, and then it will say that the angel of the Lord is in the cloud. And then God says to the people, don't take the cloud off because my name is in him. So, there's a bigger picture going on here. And so if you think about, when Paul talks about walking in the Spirit, right? Letting the Spirit guide your path. And so I look at this picture as that's the Spirit, because it's God in there. And walking by the Spirit means God is in you, guiding your way. So when the cloud gets up to leave, you get up and you leave. If the cloud sits and camps out, then you're camping out. That's walking in the Spirit, following the lead of the Most High. Exodus 14. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they turn the camp before Pi Haroth, between Migdal and the sea, opposite of Baal Zephon. And you shall camp there before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say to the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in. And then I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and I will, so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. So God's saying, I'm going to cause Pharaoh to pursue them in order to show my glory and my honor over Pharaoh, over the Egyptians. Pharaoh and the Egyptians represent oppression of Israel, the oppression of every dictator that's ever been. And so God said, I'm going to make him an example. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain the honor over Pharaoh. And all the nations will know this story because they remember it 40 years later, and Ruth is telling them, hey, yeah, we know about you guys, right? 40 years later, somebody that's, all the way in Canaan is remembering the story. That story's traveled and still remains even 40 years later. So it had to go through a couple of generations of the people of Jericho and all the nations that heard this story. So then God did get the glory, and God just says, I am control, and I can shut down Pharaoh, and I can shut down you. So this word harden, it's used several times in Exodus especially, and so we'll go through, but I will harden Pharaoh's heart, though I multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. And he hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he hearkened not unto them. Pharaoh hardened his own heart. Pharaoh hardened his own heart. And then in Exodus 9, the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. In Exodus 9, Pharaoh's hardened his own heart. And God announced that he had hardened Pharaoh's heart. And then Exodus 10:20, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let them go. So there's three words that used for this word harden. It's not just the same word. Let's see if I got it over here. So there's three words. One is kavod. That's the glory. And I kavod Pharaoh's heart, right? So how do we work that out? Kavod means glory, but also can mean heavy, right? Or burden. So I burdened Pharaoh's heart. It could mean that. Then another one is kazak, to strengthen. And I strengthen Pharaoh's heart, right? So it's already stubborn, so I strengthen that stubbornness, right? So not that he did it, he just kind of stubborn. He made him even more stubborn because he wanted them to chase the Israelites so that his glory could be manifested to the nations and to Israel. so that they would know that who that I am the Lord. So now in verse 5, it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled. He sent them out. He says, get out. And the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people, and they said, why have we done this? That we have let Israel go from serving us. We let all the workers, all the free workers go. And so he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. And he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt with captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. He strengthened the heart of the Pharaoh. And he pursued the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with boldness, so that the Egyptians pursued them, and all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen, his army, and overtook them by camping at the sea by Pi Haroth and before Baal Savan. So this little phrase of horses and chariots that's used in other places in the Bible, always to show the conquest or the battle against Israel. And then what God does to those horses and chariots. So, as a pattern through the Old Testament, Israel disobedience, and then he'll call in nations and punish them. But then, like Sennacherib of Assyria, yeah, come in, do what you really want to do. I'll let you do it. I'll give you a pass. But as soon as you're done, it's your turn, right? And we see that with Nebuchadnezzar. Come on in, Nebuchadnezzar, but as soon as you're done, I'm going to send Persia in, and it's your turn. So this word horses and chariots of Pharaoh, this horseman and his army, and overlooked them by camping. So a couple places that this word horses and chariots as an army that's going after Israel, right? And here's a little caption that the prophecies of Joel and Ezekiel about a great invasion parallel, that is, do they describe the same event? Joel said that the great army of his prophecy was unique. Joel is talking about this locust army, right? And there's like 8 parallels between Joel 1 and 2 and Revelation 19, which is also a locust army. 8 parallels. So they're asking, is this the same event? And Joel said that the great army of his prophecy was unique, a great people, strong. There has not been ever like, neither shall be more after, right? That's kind of like tribulation. It's going to be a time of great trouble that's never been or never will be again. And so this great trouble will require an army that's never been or ever will need be again, right? This is Joel talking. And then there are similarities between the prophecy of Ezekiel. Both armies come from the north. Both prophecy mentioned horses and their riders, swords, mountains, armor, and their fate is similar as they generate a great stench. The 2 prophecies compared in the following table. So in Revelation 9, it says, "In the appearance of the locusts were like horses, prepared for battle on their heads. And they were looked like crowns, gold. Their faces were human faces, their hair like woman's hair, their teeth like lions' teeth. And they had breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle." So there's the chariots and the horses as this Revelation 9 is about to go against Israel. Joel 2, their appearance is like the appearance of like war horses that run as they rumbling the chariots that leap on the tops of the mountains, and the crackling of the flame of the fire devouring the stubble like a powerful army drawn up for battle. And so when you read Joel 1 and 2, it's this locust army that sounds, well, it starts out that the beast is led out of the pit, and those that follow him are this locust army, right? Sounds demonic to me. and then they act demonic because they just seem like they're just going everywhere through the doors and the windows and jumping on the mountains, and they're unstoppable. And if they fall on the sword, they won't be wounded. Who are these people? So the parallels of these horses and chariots going after Israel, like Pharaoh is doing in this story. Verse 10, and when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, so that they were very afraid. The children of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said, Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us out to Egypt? Is this not the word what we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. Now, as you see through this whole Exodus story, they're always going, Moses, you. They seen where all the power come from. They seen how all the miracles had happened, the plagues, the death of the firstborn, and yet they're blaming on Moses, right? Moses is taking a beating. So verse 13, and Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, and stand and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians who you see today, you shall never see again, no more, forever. And the Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. So they've come through the things, they've come to the edge of the sea. There's a pillar of fire behind him, blocking Pharaoh's army. There's a giant sea in front of him. The sea represents death to him at this point, and Pharaoh's army represents death. They're in a rock and a hard place between death and death. And God has already told him in the Passover event, he says, I will, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, I will deliver you out of Egypt. The strong hand and outstretched arm always represents the Messiah, right? So he already tells them it's going to be the Messiah that's going to get you out of this. They're caught in between death and death. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, stand still. Your efforts are not required. And see the Yeshua of the Lord, right? So now this name, this outstretched arm, this Messiah figure, I'm saying now has a name. Moses just called him Yeshua, who's now the salvation of the people. So now you're standing at the Red Sea. This Red Sea opens up. The way of salvation is open. And if you stand there and never move, do you have salvation? Because eventually that sea is going to close up in Pharaoh's army. So if you don't start moving, you're going to miss that window of opportunity. And so if you get halfway through that sea and stop, do you still have salvation? No. You don't have salvation until you get all the way across to the other end. And then when Pharaoh's army is destroyed. So the word salvation is used all throughout the Old Testament, is usually to deliver you from one enemies, and to deliver you from death. Those are the main reasons that salvation is used. And so they have to go through, and I wonder if Paul, when he says, walk out your salvation with fear and trembling, I'm wondering if he was thinking about this event. So they go through the sea. Salvation. The way that the stretched out hand and an outstretched arm, and it's the salvation, the Yeshua of the Lord, that now has caused this way of salvation to happen. And if you think about Moses as a shadow type of the Messiah, his arm is now stretched out, foreshadowing the Messiah, the outstretched arm. And then that's what causes the sea to open. lots of messianic type in the life of Moses. Exodus 14:15. And the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel, go forward. You know what to do, Moses. You know, you that staff in your hand that caused the plagues and now is going to open up the way to salvation. He says, you know what to do. Why cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. But lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea. So now there's Moses' hand is and an outstretched arm is over the sea. And divide it, and it divides. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And the Lord said, so it's got dry ground here. The dry ground is just as much of a miracle as cracking open the Red Sea, right? I mean, if you've ever seen a lake or something, a pond that's been drained, it's just sludge, right? Can you imagine trying to walk through that, drag your wagon wheels through that? But no, it says that they went through dry ground. So I want to talk about a little thing that Jeremiah talks about that could connect the two. So in Genesis 1, it says, and God let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, right? So here's all the land that's submerged under the water for who knows how long, right? And when the waters receded back, it was now dry land. And God called the dry land earth. And the waters that were gathered together, he called the seas. And God saw that it was good. So we got a picture of a dry land here in Genesis 1. And then we also have another picture of dry land when Joshua was at the banks of the Jordan. And this is during the harvest or the harvest time, and the waters were way out over the banks. And they had to, the priests actually had to step into the water as a show of faith. And then the waters moved aside and they walked on dry ground, right? Another couple of miracles. So in Jeremiah 32, he says, ah, Lord God, it is you who have made the heavens and the earth by your great power. And by your outstretched arm, nothing is too hard for you. So Jeremiah is connecting the outstretched arm as the one that caused the heavens and the earth and the great power. And then you go down to verse 20 and he says, you have shown signs and the wonders in the land of Egypt. Now he's connecting the two, the heavens, the earth, the outstretched arm, which had dry ground in it, to verse 20. You have shown signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, and to this day is Israel among you, among all mankind, and have made a name for yourself at this day. So you made a name for yourself in these signs and wonders in Egypt. And you brought your people Israel out of the land of Egypt with signs and wonders, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm and with terror. So he's connecting the outstretched arm and the creation of the earth and the outstretched arm that led them out of Egypt. Exodus 14. And he says, and I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so they shall go in after them. And I will let glory over Pharaoh and all his host and his chariots and his horsemen, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen. So this is about making his name known to the nations and to Israel. And so we got a Pharaoh and chariots and horsemen. Now, Pharaoh, there's this connection to the Pharaoh that knew not Joseph, which Isaiah 52 says it was the Assyrian, right? So he wasn't Egyptian because he didn't know Joseph. How could you live in Egypt, grown up in Egypt, and not know about Joseph? You had to come. That's the theory, right? So in Ezekiel 38, this is the story of Gog and Magog. You will come up against a people in Israel like a cloud covering the land in the latter days, and I will bring you against my land, and the nations may know me. So the nations will know me when through you, O Gog, I will vindicate my holiness before their eyes. So he's going to take down Gog to vindicate his holiness before their eyes, the nations, just like he says in Exodus 14. And Gog on the mountains declared the Lord God, every man's sword will be against his brother with pestilence, bloodshed, and I will enter into judgment with him, and I will rain upon him with his hordes and many people who are with him, torrential rains and hailstorms and fire and sulfur. So I will show my greatness and my holiness and make myself known in the eyes of many nations. Then they will know that I'm God. So he's again treating Gog as like Pharaoh. You're an example piece, you know. You can't be a good example, then you're going to be a bad example. So these stories of conquest, when about Israel, God gets the glory. Exodus 14. Now it says, and the angel of the Lord, the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it says the angel of the Lord moved behind him. So who's the pillar of the cloud? The angel of the Lord, right? That theme just keeps coming up in such powerful positions of the whole story of the Old Testament. And so the cloud gets up and instead of leading them now it comes around and is in their back. And it says, and it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. So now it's in between them. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to one, Egyptians, but it gave light to the other one, so the other one did not come near the other at the night. So Israel could see the light from their side, but the Egyptian, it was only darkness, a cloud and darkness, right? So this is a picture of God's about ready to dwell and finish off Pharaoh for good. And then places that when God talks about the day of the Lord, he said it'll be a dark and cloudy day, right? So this is kind of like a day of the Lord event in advance. And what's it about? God destroying the enemies of Israel, destroying the enemies of him. And it's all to get glory, and it's all as an example to the nations. Exodus 14. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind. We see the east wind in Joseph's story as a divine intervention, and with a strong east wind, and all night, and made the sea dry. And the waters were divided, and the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground. The waters being a wall to them on their right and on their left, and the Egyptians pursued, because their heart is now strengthened to get this done. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after into the midst of the sea. And Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning watched the Lord in the morning watched the Lord in the pillar of the fire and the cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their wheels, that they moved slowly. I don't know what I should have looked at the word clogging. Maybe it says, and now I made the dry ground mud. So he's now clogging the wheels of the chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee before Israel, for the Lord fight for them against the Egyptians. They had one smart guy there. Says this is not going to work. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, and the water came back upon the Egyptians. So this strong hand, outstretched arm, gives salvation. The strong hand, outstretched arm, devours the enemies of Israel. That the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon the chariots, and upon their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course. When the morning appeared, as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the hosts of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on the right and to the left. So he mentions this wall on the left and the right twice. So, there's some kind of a connection, because sometimes it says, do not go to the right, do not go to the left. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Sometimes God says, I am the wall that will protect you. Verse 30. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So when they were first doing it, it was daytime. And then he said the strong east wind held the waters back all night. So you got, I can't remember, 1.5 million people traveling with wagons and kids and animals, and so it's going to take a while. And I think it's a 2.5 mile stretch where they're at, so they're going to have to walk 2.5 miles, which ain't that far, but with that many people, you probably move pretty slow. And so it took all night for them to get to the other side. And then the waters come in and destroy the enemies of Israel. And when it came morning, they looked out on the shore and on the seashore, and here's all the dead bodies of the Egyptians. So the Egyptians, which represented death, has now been destroyed. Death has been swallowed up by God. And that particular death will never be their problem again. So it looks like a future picture one day when God does swallow up death for us, which he has, which when in the resurrection we'll regain it. But Paul says, "Oh, where is thy sting, O death?" And you know, there's no more sting. And so that which represented death has now have been destroyed. Death is gone, swallowed up by God, and they will never deal with that again. So then we got the Song of Moses. Then there's this big musical comes out. And then Moses and the children of Israel sang the song to the Lord and spoke, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my Yeshua. He is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. A man of war. Interesting. And Yah is his name. Verse 4. So here we see the Pharaoh's chariots and his armies are cast in the sea, his chosen captains, and all that drowned in the sea, and the depths have covered them. They sank to the bottom of the stone. This is still that song. They've found some evidence, usually these big coral pieces that look like axles of chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea. So he says, your right hand, O Lord, has become your glorious power. Your right hand, O Lord, has dashed the enemies your feet. Notice that he's saying your right hand has done this. Your right hand has become glorious power. Your right hand has dashed the enemies in pieces. Your right hand. You know, in a Jewish Seder, you know, they pray, and I think it's on Yom Kippur, and they go, for your name's sake and your right hand's sake, right? This is the Jews talking. So they recognize his right hand and they separate it and give attention to both. And in the greatness of your excellence, you have overthrown those who are against you. You have sent forth your wrath, it consumed them like stubble. Kind of weird language using stubble here when he drowned them, right? But we see other places in the Bible where he will destroy them and they will like stubble. Continuing on with the song of Moses, and the blast of your nostrils, the waters were gathered together, the flood stood upright like a heap, the depths congealed in the heart of the sea. And the enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall be satisfied on them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. This is the enemy. It kind of sounds like Isaiah 14. I will ascend above the Most High. I will above the clouds. I will pursue them. I will overtake. I will divide the spoil. And my hand shall destroy them. This is Pharaoh's hand. He says, but you blew your wind. The sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? This is the Mika Mocha song, right? Who is like you, Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? Thou stretchest out thy right hand, and the earth swallowed them. You in thy mercy hath led forth the people which thou hast redeemed, and hast guided them in the strength unto the holy habitation. The people shall hear and be afraid. Sorrow shall take hold of the inhabitants of Palestina. So now they're bringing in a future pictures into this Song of Moses. We've destroyed them, but now we're going to cause sorrow to be in the inhabitants of Palestine. Then the dukes of Edom, the dukes, the word duke means chiefs, the head people of Edom, shall be amazed. And the mighty man of Moab, trembling, shall take a hold of him, and all the inhabitants of Canaan. So now he's talking about other places that's not even really connected to the sea, but he's like, you know, they're on the target list because they will be. And it's funny because when in Deuteronomy 33, he talks about this being of light that's coming the same way as Moses did, traveling the same path as Moses, and fighting the same enemies as Moses. But he's such a light that it's like a sun dawning over the Mount of Seir, right? And they can see this light coming up over the mountain. And then they can see it coming over the mountain of Paran. These are the same places Moses went to, but this being has got light coming out of his hands. And, you know, I come in the glory of my Father. This is a picture of Jesus doing the second Exodus, traveling the same Exodus path as Moses, fighting the same enemies as Moses. Exodus 33 and Habakkuk 3 both say similar events. It's fascinating. Exodus 15:16, where the dread shall fall upon them by the greatness of thine arm, they shall pass and be still as stone. They, thy peoples, pass over the Lord till the people pass over, which thou hast purchased. Thou shalt bring them in and plant them in the mountains of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell, in the sanctuary of the Lord, with thy hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. For the horse of Pharaoh went into the chariots, and with the horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought again the waters upon the sea upon them, but the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. This is quite a song. And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and the women went out with her with timbrels and dances. This is the dance of victory, right? So when the ladies bring out their timbrels and they're doing their dance, this is a dance of a victory that's happened and that will happen. We're prophesying with the dancing of a future redemption. And Marian answered them, said, "Sing ye unto the Lord." Sing. Now we got singers, a worship team. Part of this picture of redemption, part of this victory. And for he hath triumphed gloriously, the horse and his rider hath he thrown in the sea. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. And they came to Marah. They could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Marah. So they went to a place that's called bitter and found bitter water there, and they couldn't drink it. And the people murmured against Moses, "Moses, you again, saying, what shall we drink?" And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which there he had cast into the water, and the waters were made sweet. I think you can kind of maybe come up with a reason that's going on there with wood and taking something that's bitter and turning it sweet. And he made them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them. And he said, "If thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought into the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee." So here we are in 2025, you know, we're now taking blood pressure medicine, diabetic medicine, high cholesterol medicine, and those, we've come into the diseases of Egypt. Somewhere along the line, we've broken the commandments, not kept his statutes, and the diseases of Egypt have now come upon us. Then they came to Elam, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the water. 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. I mean, these are very familiar numbers. 70 is the number of the nations that were divided at the Tower of Babel. 70 is the number of elders that went up to the mountain that saw God and ate as a proxy for the covenant of the 70 nations. 70 is the number of amount of animals that are sacrificed on the Feast of Tabernacles. 70 is the number of the nations. And the 12 springs. So this is, to me, I'm saying this is the 12 springs are the 12 tribes of Israel that will water the 70 nations. Not now, but they will. And they camped there by the water. And that was the original plan. Take my light to the nations and my salvation to the ends of the earth. That was the plan. Exodus 16. And they sent out from Elim, and the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, in which between Elim and Sinai. And on the 15th day of the second month, after they had departed the land of Egypt, and the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron and the wilderness, and the people of Israel said to them, "Would that he had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meats of pots and ate the bread to full, and you have brought us into the wilderness to kill the assembly with hunger." You, Moses. So this is the second month and the 15th day. This is just 30 days after the last feast of unleavened bread. This is still fresh. So when we go through the Exodus story, this is Exodus 16:1, and the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin on the 15th day of the second month. So we've got two time markers after the departing from the land of Egypt. So on the 15th day of the second month, this is just 30 days ago, was the first feast of unleavened bread, was the day that they left Egypt. It's only 45 days away from the point where God says, this shall be the beginning of months. It's only 45 days. I mean, we're only 45 days into this calendar, and he's already given us time markers. And then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, for the people shall go out and gather a day's portion, an omer, every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. So this is a test. Whether they will walk in his law. What law? They haven't even got to Mount Sinai yet. Is it the same law that Abraham followed? You know, Genesis 26, and he obeyed my voice, my charge, my statutes, my commandments, and my law. Right? So Abraham knew. And he says, whether they will walk in my law or not. So this is a test. If you won't do Sabbath, you probably won't do the feast days, and you'll probably have a ham sandwich in your mouth. Right? And on the sixth day, when they prepared what they were bringing in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So on the sixth day, they gather twice as much daily. This is also a picture of a Shemitah year. 6 years you harvest, and then on the sixth year, you don't harvest. Well, the sixth year, because you'll get a double portion that will take you through the Shemitah year, which you're not supposed to. You can't go in and harvest. You can only go out and get your daily bread or your daily grapes and figs. So it's a picture of the Shemitah year. And so, and he says, and on the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to them, all the people of Israel, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against for the Lord, for what we are and what you grumble against. So we got two time markers so far. We got the second day, or the second month, and the 15th day. So that's going to be somewhere in the middle of the month. So two markers. And Moses and Aaron said to all the children of Israel, in the morning you shall see the glory of the day. So the next day they see the glory of the Lord. They don't get any manna, right? So the manna week has not started yet. So it's probably a Saturday, because you're not to gather any manna on Saturday. So I'm saying that the next day that they've seen the glory of the Lord, could this be a picture of on the seventh day that we will see the glory of the Lord, right? And then it says, Exodus 16:11, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, in the morning ye shall be filled with bread. So the 15th day, he says, in the morning you see the glory of the Lord. On the seventh day, now the manna week started, and then he says, in the morning you shall be filled with bread. That's the 17th, that's on a Sunday. This starts the 6 days. And Moses said to them, this is the bread which the Lord has given to you to eat. Exodus 16:22. And it came to pass that on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread. So here's the manna week. So here's the 6 days. So we got another time marker. We got the 15th of the second month, we got a day that's going to be, the next day will be Sabbath. Then we got 6 days. So there's what, 4 time markers. And then he says on the 6th day you gather twice as much. And then he says, and the Lord and he said unto them, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow, not the 6th day, tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. So now we've got 5 time markers on here, right? Is only 15 days away from the last Feast of Unleavened Bread, 45 days from Genesis, and this shall be the beginning of months. So whatever calendar, I'm saying it would have to look like this. So we got to do our homework and go back and track that stuff to see how it lays out. You know, where would the moon been on day 1 and stuff like that? And I mean, we should be able to do it. And then Exodus 16:17, and the people of Israel did so. They gathered some more, some less. And when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as they could eat. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it until the morning. They did not listen to Moses. So he says, don't leave it till morning. You're only to get your daily bread, right? Jesus says, and give us our daily bread. Just give us what we need today. I'll take care of tomorrow. And let no one leave any of it over till morning. But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till morning, and it bred worms and it stank. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as they could eat, but when the sun grew hot, it melted. It's a limited time offer only. So then we look over here on this picture on the right. We got this guy pouring a bag into this, what would represent an ephah. That's the size of an ephah. And it represents 10 omers, 10 portions. And it represents 20 dry quarts of grain. So what they were to get was not the largest one, not the second one down, but the middle one, the smaller one. That one is 2 quarts. That's an omer. So that's what they were supposed to get for the day to last them throughout the day. Cook it, bake it. And then in verse 36 of chapter 16, it says, an omer is a 10th part of an ephah. So it tells us that an omer, a portion, is a 10th part of an ephah. So we can see the size of that omer. Exodus 17, therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses said to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and the children and our livestock with thirst? So Moses cried to the Lord, what shall I do with these people? They're about ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, pass on before the people, taking up with some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff which you struck the Nile, and go before, and I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb. He's going to stand him before them on the rock at Horeb. Is this the rock that he's about to strike? God is now standing on that rock that he's about to strike, because when he strikes that rock, it represents Yeshua, striking Yeshua. Because the next time he says, don't strike it, then that gets him in big trouble. So it says, I, God, will stand before you there on the rock of Mount Horeb, the rock which you're going to strike, and you shall strike that rock, the one I'm on top of, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink. Paul says this is the rock, this water that followed him in the wilderness. Not this rock, but I think as they traveled, other rocks brought forth water. And he says, and that rock is Christ. And that's what it seems like it's saying here. God's saying, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb. Not on Horeb, but on the rock at Horeb, the rock that you're about to strike, which I'm standing on because it represents me. Exodus 17, then Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose us and go out and fight for Amalek. Tomorrow we stand on top of the hill with the staff and the staff of God. Other times it was Moses' staff. Other times he said it was your staff. Go get your staff. Now he's saying it's the staff of God. And in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses and Aaron and Hur went to the top of the hill. Wherever Moses held his hand, Israel prevailed. So as long as he was up here, you know, maybe in the position of praise, but as long as his hands were up, Israel prevailed. And when his hands got tired and they lowered, Amalek prevailed. But Moses grew weary, and so took a stone, they put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur held up his hands, so they're holding up his hands, so they stay up, so that they can win this battle. And they held up his hands on one side, and on one side on the other, and on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So you've got two people supporting Moses' arms, and that word is translated as steady in the English. In the Hebrew, it's the word emunah. So in Habakkuk 2, which Paul quotes, he says, the righteous shall live by faith. That's emunah. So really emunah, which is a word for faith, but they shall live by their faithfulness. They had to be faithful to hold up Moses' arm so they can win. So faith has two meanings. One is believing that God will keep his promise. The other one is to be faithful in what he's told you to do, right? So we see through the New Testament, and they translate as, today they translate it all as just faith. And I'm just believing in Jesus, right? There's no faithfulness involved. And when I bring it up sometimes, the wheels start turning, and then the game is on. So they held his hands were steady until the going down of the sun, till the end of the day, and Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. So Amalek is an interesting word. It says the lineage of Amalek is traced back to Genesis 36:11, where Timah, a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son, bore Amalek. So Amalek is a grandchild of Esau. Timah was a Horite, as noticed in Genesis 36:20. The Horites known to have resided in the hill country of Seir in the land of Edom, and described as giants of Rephaim in Deuteronomy 2, and actually should be Numbers 13. So Timah was a Horite connected to people that lived in the hill country, and that's where the Rephaim, the giants, lived. Whenever you see the hill country, that's usually where they're at. So, if you guys know Rob Skiba, it says, and there was giants in those days and after those days, right? So he connects that the seed of Ham's wife had the DNA of Nephilim, because somehow they got it back into the bloodline and back into the DNA. because certainly they didn't survive the flood. And so now they're saying Tema was a Horite, and the Horite was that resided in the hills of the country of Seir and in the land of Edom. Seir is one of these places that this beam of light is going to come down, shining over the Mount Seir, and he's conquering the same enemies of Moses did. I mean, there's the Nephilim wars that starts all the way back with Abraham, right? These 5 kings go kill the giants, the Nephilim, and then they go in and ransack Sodom, and then take Lot and Abraham with 300 guys against 5 kingdoms takes them out. And these guys killed giants. Wow. Kudos to Abraham. Okay, so yet I was down here at Amos 2:9, and yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before them. So God's saying, I was the one that did it, whose height was like the height of a cedar, and he was strong as oaks, and yet I destroyed his fruit above and his roots below. And it's also I who brought you out of the land of Egypt and led you 40 years to the wilderness to possess the land of the Amorite. So God's saying, I'm the one that's taken out these mixtures. You're residing in the area of these giants. There's good chance there's some cross mixing going on. So the word Amalek is not even a Hebrew word. It's actually an Arabic word. We see that at the top here, and that's how they spell it. When you go to Google search and put in Amalek, you put that Hebrew text in there, it comes up giant. So in Arabic, Amalek is a giant. It's translated as giant, gargantuan, and titan, maybe making connections to the titans in the Greek mythology, right? So I did a Google search with that Hebrew text, Imlach, and I come with Andre the Giant, and then somebody that looks like a Nephilim, right? So Aramaic is connecting Amalek to giants. Interesting. We'll close with this. So some of the Amalekites were usually tall, and the Arabic word for Amalek means giant. Giants also played an important role in the biblical story, particularly in relation to the occupation of the Promised Land. Amalek, Amalek in Hebrew, but Imlach is the name is Arabic, not Hebrew. It makes no sense in Hebrew. And I looked it up, and I was thinking, it's going to be a people of something, right? Doesn't give me anything. Then I find out that's because it's an Arabic word, and it's which is the God, and Lak, which means worthy and honorable. So it's a giant that's a God that's worthy to be honored. That's the Arabic version. Is the name of the Kataban God. The second half is Laka. That means to be worthy or to be honorable. So that's a very strange word to be, and these are the people that Moses is fighting. So we see the map on the right-hand side. God says, I'm going to take you out of the land of the Jebusites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites. These are all people, you look here, they're all in the hill country, right? Michael Heiser says that, when he tells Joshua to go in and devote to destruction, it's these people in the hill country. Other people, he says, just to drive out or dispossess the land from them. It's not a lethal term. So the lethal term, in Heiser's opinion, is to devote to destruction people that are connected to this Nephilim tribe. So God's in control. Thank you, and God bless.